This video is for anyone who finds layers and masking confusing in Photoshop. By the end, you'll have a solid understanding of how to use layers, adjustment layers, and layer masks, even if you've never used them before. So if layers and masking has felt like a stubborn jam jar lid that you've never been able to undo, then let me know in the comments the moment in the video where it finally clicks and the lid pops right off. Let's get started. First, if you're unaware, the layers panel is where all the action happens, and if you can't see it, then just go to the window menu and select layers. Now, every time you open an image, it's going to sit on its own layer, usually called background. You can duplicate this layer by right-clicking and choosing duplicate, and that gives you this identical layer that sits on top of the original background. So nothing about the image itself looks different at the moment because the copy looks exactly the same as the original. Those pixels are actually the same. Think of it like having two identical 6x4 photo prints stacked on top of each other on your desk in front of you right now. You only see the top one, but the bottom one is still there, untouched. In theory, you could take a marker pen and draw on the top print, and the bottom print is going to remain unchanged. For demonstration purposes, let's do the digital equivalent. So I'll take a white brush at 100% opacity, and I'll draw a squiggly line on the top layer. Now let's try and make a more useful adjustment. So with the background copy layer selected, I'll go to Image, Adjustments, and Curves. And then when you drag the line upwards in the curves adjustment, the image is going to get a bit brighter. So we've done that. Now let's click OK to apply the adjustment. And we can see the image has got a bit brighter, but if you hide this top layer by toggling this little eye icon, you can see the untouched original layer underneath it. Turning the top layer back on, let's duplicate it again and let's apply another adjustment. So this time I'll use the hue saturation adjustment and increase the saturation with this slider. And again, it only affects that very top layer that was selected when I made the adjustment. So now we have three layers, each one representing a different stage of editing. If I hide the saturation layer, then we can see the brightened version with the squiggle on it. And if I hide that one too, then we see the untouched original. But there is an important problem that happens when you edit this way. Now, before I show you what it is, just a quick one to let you know that if you want to download a written version of this video, that you can print off or just refer back to at any time, then click the link in the description or pinned comment below. Right, okay, this problem I was talking about, we created two new layers so far with an adjustment on each one. What if you change your mind and you want to undo the brightening effect completely? Now you might think that you could just delete the layer where you did the brightening, but the problem is that it still exists on the subsequent layer that you made the next adjustment on, which is now on top of your layers stack. So to fully remove the brightening effect, you actually have to delete this top one as well. But the problem with that is that you've now deleted your hue saturation adjustment. So what you have to do now is remember the exact amount of saturation that you added and then do it again. Imagine spending time on 5 or 10 different adjustments only to realize that you want to remove or change the second or third one, and that to do that is going to affect every one of those ones that you've made afterwards. That's a lot of wasted time going back and redoing those edits, right? But the good news is that's where non-destructive editing comes in, because the issue with the first method is that each time you make an edit, you're actually changing the physical pixels contained in that layer. A more flexible way to make these same adjustments is with something called adjustment layers. So let's reset. I'll delete the copied layers by selecting them and dragging them onto the trash can icon down here, leaving just the original background layer. And what adjustment layers do is they let you stack edits without touching the original pixels or making copies of the background. You'll find them at the bottom of the layers panel, this little circle icon, split black and white. Clicking it brings up this menu with most of the same options as what you'll find in image adjustments via the menu, but these work in a non-destructive way. Now it works pretty much the same for all of these, but I'll pick curves from the adjustment layer menu for this example, and Photoshop's going to create this special layer that holds the adjustment only, not any image pixels. So remember, this isn't a copy of the background, it's literally just the adjustment on its own layer. Imagine it being like a transparency sheet on an overhead projector. So you can see through it completely, but instead of being able to write onto it like I remember my teachers doing back in school years ago, the sheet itself is what holds the adjustment that you're about to make. So by pushing the curve upwards, the image becomes brighter, but that brightening effect is actually being held in this otherwise transparent layer. And now you can hide the adjustment by toggling its eye icon just like with the regular layers. So next I'll add a hue saturation adjustment layer. And again, no pixels or layers are being duplicated or created at this point. I'm just adding another transparency on top of everything else in my fictional overhead projector. Now let's crank the saturation too high, but it's going to be easy to see on the video. And now what we have is basically the exact same edits as before, but this time without duplicating the background or baking the adjustments into any pixel-based layers. Now here's where this gets really good. I can go back to the curves adjustment at any time and make changes to it, and even though it's underneath the hue saturation adjustment, the change is visible in the image. Why? Because adjustment layers, like I said, only hold the adjustment and are otherwise transparent. It doesn't matter how many adjustment layers you add, you can always go back and edit them individually or hide them completely, and the changes are going to be visible through all of the subsequent adjustment layers that you've added on top. Now here's where this gets really powerful. A layer mask is used to cover or hide part of a layer, and it works like this. On my background layer I have this one image, and I've loaded another photo into this layer. So that's like having two physical prints of two different photos placed on top of one another in front of you on your desk right now. So suppose you want to make part of this top photo transparent so you can see through it to the photo below, but you don't actually want to cut a hole in it. Think of it like adding an invisibility cloak to part of the top image. Right, so to do that, you'd first add a layer mask to this top layer, and this is the thing that will hold the invisibility cloak. And then you'd click on the layer mask over here and brush with a black brush into the parts of the image that you want to add the invisibility cloak to. And then as I brush with the black brush over here, you can see that the top layer is becoming transparent and the bottom layer is starting to show through. So that's the basic idea of layer masks. Let me show you now how powerful this is when you use them with adjustment layers. Because when you add an adjustment layer, it comes with a layer mask already attached. And by default, the mask starts out completely white, which means nothing is being cloaked. The adjustment is fully visible. So let me just quickly push this curve up to add a brightening effect to the image so we've got something to work with. Now, watch what happens when I use a black brush in the layer mask of this brightening curve. You can see that the brightening effect is being hidden or cloaked in the areas that I'm brushing, returning them back to the original brightness that's visible via the layer underneath. And now if I toggle the curves adjustment layer on and off a couple of times, you can see that the curves adjustment now only affects the top half of the image because I've masked it out or cloaked it in the bottom half. Now here's another cool thing. If you happen to cloak the area that you didn't want to cloak, you can just use a white brush in that same layer mask to uncloak it. And another very important tip, I was using the brush at a 100% opacity and with a hardness of 100% for this example to make it easily visible in the video, but I highly recommend actually using an opacity of 30% and a hardness of 0 to make your brush strokes more subtle. Otherwise you're going to end up with highly visible lines and transitions between the areas that you've cloaked and those you haven't. Now, that said, you can still end up with visible lines and transitions. They just might not be as obvious to the casual viewer of your photos. And if you want to make your layer masks really accurate, refined, and effective, then watch this next video where I'll show you a masking technique that literally changed my life.